Today, we'll be concluding our dive into the fundamentals of Python by taking a look at dictionaries and functions. After today's lesson, you should have learned all the basics of Python that you'll need to start coding for whether if you want to make games, work with robots, use sensors, actuate motors, or even start machine learning. Let's begin. So, once again, let's review the main object types in Python. There are four main object types. We have numbers, which comprises of integers, whole numbers, floats, which are decimals. We have strings, which can be any collection of letters or numbers. We have lists, which can contain strings, floats, integers, or even other lists. And then we have the last main object type, which is a dictionary, something that we'll be focusing on today. But before we begin, the special thing about dictionaries is that each item in a dictionary has a key and a value. So if you look down at this example right here, we have the key here, which is food, and then the value here is spam. And then again, if you go to the next item, you have taste, and then the value is yum. So this dictionary is giving a word and is giving an example of that word. So let's see what a dictionary exactly is. So a dictionary is very similar to a list, but instead of having items in a list, a dictionary has items which each of which has a key and a value. And instead of using square brackets, we actually use these curly brackets. And similarly to a list, the items are separated by a comma. And also like a list, every single item in the list or key and value pair is numbered. And just like lists, it starts at 0. So right down here, I have an example of a dictionary. So we have BMW, and then we have car, which is the value. We have Boeing, which is a key, and then we have plane as the value. Then we have Honda as a key, and then bike as a value. So here we're listing a manufacturer and what they produce. So because BMW produces cars, Boeing produces planes, and Honda produces motorbikes. So why don't we go into Python and let's open a new file. And before we start coding anything, let's save the file so we can save all our progress and not worry about losing it. So I'm going to save this one as Python 3. Yes. And let's begin with making a sample dictionary. So what I'm going to do for this dictionary is I'm going to make a dictionary of vehicles. And I start with the curly bracket, and then I put in my first item or key and value pair. So let's do vehicles. Let's name a vehicle and then how many tires it has. So let's do cars. Cars have 4 tires. And then let's add a semi-truck. Semi-trucks typically have 16 tires. And then let's add a plane. I'm not quite sure how many tires a plane has, but for this example, let's put 48 because I know planes need a lot of tires for all those wheels when you're landing on the ground. And then let's add one more. Let's add a motorcycle. Motorcycle. Don't forget, since these are strings, you have to always put them in quotes. For the integers, you can leave them as is because you don't need to put anything around an integer. So motorcycles have 2 wheels. And let's close out the dictionary using a curly bracket. And let's go back to our presentation. So we have a similar dictionary like this. And so now, new concept. Finding a value using a key. You can find the value of any key by referencing it. So let's say I know my dictionary tells me how many wheels if I give them a type of vehicle. If I print it out like this, where I give the dictionary name, and then in square brackets, I put the key or what type of vehicle I'm looking for, it should print out hopefully how many wheels it has. So let's put that to the test. So let's print out vehicles, because that's our dictionary name, square bracket, and then the name of the vehicle that we want to see how many tires it has. Let's print out car. See what is the value of car. So let's run that. Oh, looks like I forgot to close off those parentheses. Let's run it one more time. Car. Oh, I forgot an S. Very important that you match up your names, otherwise it'll give you an error. And one helpful tip is that when you do get an error, you always want to look at this last line and it'll usually tell you what's the issue. So it said key error, car. And the reason it said car was an error is because up here I saved it as cars, and down here I was referencing it as car without an S. So I can just simply fix that issue by putting the S. So let's run it now. Hopefully I won't get any errors. There we go. It said 4. Now let's try truck or semi. Say the semi. 16. Perfect. So now you can see if you take the dictionary variable or the name of the dictionary and in square brackets put in a key, it'll spit out the value. Let's move on to the next concept. Very simple. Concept: adding or updating a pair. You can add a new key and value pair to a dictionary just by simply declaring it. So the syntax here is showing that you have the dictionary name or the dictionary var, and then you put it in, just like how we were referencing it, we put it in square brackets, and then we put in our key, and then we set it equal to a value. Very simple. And we have an example right here. We have vehicles plane equals 48. So then you can use the same syntax to actually update the value of a key. So if a key like that already exists in the dictionary, it'll update it automatically. It will not add a new one. Python is very smart in that respect. So let's update one, and let's add a new pair also while we're at it. So let's add vehicles, because that's the name of our dictionary. And what's the vehicle? Boat. Boat equals 0, because boats don't need tires, because they're hopefully not driving on land. So that'll hopefully add a new pair to the dictionary of a key and a value. Now let's update one of our values. So let's say I have in vehicles, and let's say I have a car, but it has 5 wheels. Or actually, let's say I have a tricycle car. Let's say it has 3 wheels. And let's close off our parentheses correctly. Now let's print out the dictionary vehicles. We should hopefully see that cars has changed to 3. We have updated it by using this. And then we have hopefully added the new vehicle, boat, and it has 0, just like we added it. So as you can see, if you use this syntax, you can either add a new pair, or if it already exists, it updates it. So let's move on to the next concept. Concept: check the existence of something. So we already kind of glazed over this in the last tutorial when we were checking for if someone was in the password system. So the way you do this, I won't do it in Python, but I'll quickly cover it right here. If a variable or something is in this list, you can make it do something. So like, let's say if the car was present in vehicles, we can say car is present, or we can say car is a vehicle. But then let's say the most helpful thing is if we had a program that asks for a user to name a vehicle, and it stores it in this variable called x. Then we can say if x in vehicles, print x, comma, quotation, is a vehicle. Else print x is not a vehicle. That way we can even check if what they gave us was a vehicle. So this is very helpful when it comes to when you're checking for like passwords or checking if something exists inside of a list or a dictionary. Challenge: my first store. Make a dictionary with 5 products and each of its prices. So the product will be the key and the value will be the price for each product. Then we're going to ask how many of each product using a for loop. So we're going to use a for loop where it says for x in, and then the dictionary name. And then we're going to ask how many you want of each item. And then what we're going to do is we're going to take that quantity and multiply it by the price. So you're going to have to extract the value from the dictionary using its key, and then multiply by the price and add it to a subtotal. So we're going to have this running total, and then we're at the end of asking how many of they want of each of the 5 items, we're going to show them a subtotal. So then, after we show them a subtotal, we're going to ask them what state you live in. Do you live in California? Do you live in Nevada, Oregon, whatever? Then we're going to see if that state is in our system. If it isn't in our system, what we tell them is we cannot ship to you because we don't serve your state or your region. If they are in the region we serve, like let's say they put in Oregon, we charge the tax rate that is for that state. So the way we calculate that is we have a new dictionary, a second dictionary of states. We have, like, let's say California and 8% tax. We have Oregon, and the value is going to be 0% tax. So add 5 or 6 states where you're going to serve and add the tax rate for their value. So then after we find out what state they live in, we calculate their tax. Then we calculate how much tax their order comes out, how much tax their order is going to incur. And then we add the tax to the subtotal and present the total to our customer. So this challenge is actually a progress check challenge, and you will need to complete this challenge before you can move on to the next tutorial. Concept: defining a function. You can define your own function to call multiple times later in a program without rewriting it. So what you got to do is, if you look at the syntax right here, I'll cover this important point in a moment, but you do def, that means you're defining a function. You're going to put your own function name here and any arguments or numbers or any variables that you're going to take into the function. So, and then inside of that, you're going to put whatever the function does. So right now I have an example right here. I have define add num. So this is my own function. And so that brings us up to here. Place any variables or arguments that will be used within a function inside the parentheses. So then you might ask, what is a variable or an argument? So the variable or argument that we place inside of these parentheses are basically like, we're taking them in, and those are the numbers that we have identified that we're gonna process. So in this example function that I have right here, we defined the name add num, and we're taking in a number a and b. So when you're going to call this function, you're going to need to put one number here and a number here. So a has to equal something, b has to equal something. Then what are we doing with a and b? We are adding them together and getting c. And then this function also prints c. So let me give you an example, and it'll make a little bit more sense, hopefully. So before we continue, let's comment this out. Alt 3, in case you forgot. So let's define a function. Let's call it adding, and this is my function. And we're gonna add 2 numbers. So what we have to do, we have to take an a and a b, because we're gonna take in 2 numbers. Then I'm gonna close that colon, and then now we're gonna define what the function does. We're just gonna do print a plus b. So now what we can do is do another type of function. So let's define a different kind of function. Let's define a function that greets people. So let's call this greeting. So since we're not taking anything into the function, we don't need to put anything in the parentheses. What this function does, it'll first ask for someone's name. So it's going to ask name equals input. What is your name? Then we're going to print out name, comma. You have to actually say hello first. Hello, name. And then we're going to print out, I hope you had a good day, comma, name. So this whole function does this. So whenever we're going to call this, it'll complete all these lines of code. So let's discuss, how do we call the function? And as intimidating as it may sound, it's actually very easy. All you got to do to call a function is use its name and any arguments that need to be inside of it. And some functions may not even have arguments. So let's go back to the Python and let's call these functions. Let's first start with greeting, because that's the easiest one. We're going to call greeting. Don't forget the parentheses. Now, if we do that, actually, let me show you something. If we didn't call it, we just defined the function, nothing will happen. See, nothing is showing up. So that's why it's very important when you have a function and you want to use it, you have to call it down below. So greeting. Now, if we put that back in, it's going to run this function right here, my own custom greeting function. So it's asking, what is your name? I'm going to put in Rayyan. Now it's going to say, hello, Rayyan. I hope you had a good day, Rayyan. It did all of that just with this one line of code. In the future, what you can do is you can start making functions and put them on one file, and then you can store that away, not have to deal with all that clutter, and then you can open a new file and just have this one line of code, and it'll do all that because it'll reference the function from another file. It's a little bit more advanced, and we'll discuss that hopefully in a future tutorial. But for now, we're going to have them on the same file. But as you can see, it's very helpful for condensing code. And especially if you use it multiple times, all you got to do is use this one line instead of retyping all those lines of code each time. So we tried the greeting function out. Now let's call the adding function. So let's call the adding function. But let's say I did not know that you have to put any arguments in. Or let's say I forgot to put the arguments. It will not work. So let's actually let's comment out our greeting function because we don't want that to work anymore. Now we're going to get an error. It says missing 2 required positional arguments. Whenever you use the my adding function, you're going to need to put in 2 arguments or 2 numbers. So let's put in 1 and 2. Hopefully we're going to get 3. So very good. So you always have to put in what numbers you want to use in the function. If you don't put in numbers, it won't work. Very simple and self-explanatory, hopefully. So first challenge, greeting. Collect a user's name stored in a variable, create a function that says hello to the user, and deploy your function with the user's name. I think we already did that in our example. So let's move on to the next challenge. Challenge, wacky function. Collect a number from a user, and define a function that will take any number and multiply it by 2, then add 5, then divide by 3, and then subtract 1. Kind of wacky. Then we're going to print out the result to show the user this new number. So let's try that out. So first, let's comment this out and let's define a function. And let's call it Wacky. And let's collect the user's input in the function so we don't have to put any positional arguments. So let's take an input. We're going to call this the variable num, or actually user number. So let's call it unum. Let's take an input. And let's ask for a number. Then we're going to take unum and we're going to multiply it by 2. So as you remember, doing this is actually the same as just doing this. Unum equals 2. So unum equals unum times 2 is equivalent to this form where we put the operator or whatever type of math we're trying to do equals to 2. It's going to multiply itself by 2 basically. It's just a shorthand form. Now what we do is we add 5 and then divide it by 3. So let's add 5. Unum, same thing applies to addition. Unum plus 5. Unum divided by equals 3. And then one last one, I think is subtracting by 1. Minus equals 1. Then what do? We print out unum. We print out unum. So let's run it. Nothing happened. That's because we forgot to call the function. So let's call the function. We're going to call the function Wacky. So what part of this whole program is doing the code? This one little line. This one little line is referencing this. So we are condensing all of our code into this one line. So let's run it now. Hopefully it should work. So it's going to ask me, put in a number. Let's put in 67. Oh, we forgot one crucial thing. Whenever you take an input, you must convert it to an integer if you plan to do any math with it. So let's put int around of this. As you may remember from the first tutorial, we can convert from integers to strings, strings to floats, floats to strings, vice versa. But it's very important that if we do take an input, we convert it from a string to an integer. Otherwise, it won't be able to do the math properly. So let's save it. Let's put in 67. Perfect. So we get our wacky function gives us 45.3333 perpetually. And that's it. I believe we've finished this challenge in lightning speed. Assessment. TIC TAC TOE. This assessment is one of the final hurdles before you can pass and move on to the next level where you work with robotics, games, or even start machine learning. This assessment is mandatory before you can move on to those levels. And I'll quickly explain it right here. So what this assessment is requiring you to do is you need to make a tic-tac-toe game. It has to be for 2 players, and the board should look like just like this. How do we achieve that look? We have a dictionary, and then we use a for loop to print it out like that. You can just copy my code from the picture right here. Now, what you have to do is you have to ask the player, where do they want to place their marker? At position 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, or 9. And then depending on whose turn it is, if it's player 1 or player 2, you put an X or an O. Then, next slide has more instructions. Don't forget to check if a position has already been claimed by an opponent. If player 2 tries to put up his marker on a position that player 1 has already claimed, we have to print try again. And you can see that in my sample game right here. Looks like this player tried to put on his marker on position 2, but there's already something there. So the computer said, please try again. So you have to program to do that. Then you also have to make a function that checks if anybody has won the game. So you're going to have to make a function with a bunch of if statements with all the different variations of winning games. That's very important. And then you're going to call that function each time a player goes so you can check if anybody's won. And then additionally, if nobody can win, you got to say it's a cat's game. So this is the last assessment before you can move on. This is concluding this tutorial, but I will give a quick demo of what we are looking for to pass this assessment. So let me open up my tic-tac-toe game. And hopefully it'll be blurred out so you can't see any of the code. So if you look at the shell right here, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. It's telling me to pick a number. And if I put in 5, it put an X at position 5. So that's basically equivalent to putting an X in the middle of a tic-tac-toe board game. So now it's player 2's turn. Player 2 is going to put something at position 7. So now there's an O at the 7th place on the board. Now let's say I wasn't paying attention and I want to put something at position 7. I'm going to say, please try again. So then what you got to do is you got to keep on letting the players play. And after about 5 turns, people can start winning. So you have to start checking, has anybody won? Or if you want, you can even check every time after someone goes from the beginning. However you want to do it. It has to be a working game where 2 players can play. It can tell if when someone has won. It can tell when nobody can win. And also, you cannot cheat by putting your piece on top of another. It has to detect if a placeholder has already been taken. It's a little bit of a complicated game, but it's very rewarding once you finish. So that about concludes our last installment to learn the fundamentals of Python. If you have any questions, please contact me at Rayyan@learnersdome.org. We have all our slides and access to all this material on learnersdome.org. And we'll be holding weekly classes at UC Davis on Sundays from 3:30 to 6:30. So if you'd like to join, please email me and I'll get back to you as soon as possible. Thank you for watching. Please drop a like and subscribe. We'll have more tutorials coming in the future. Have a great day.